The warning sirens echoed through the corridors of Mining Station Alpha 7 as Commander Sarah Chen stared at the tactical display. 17 massive alien ships hung in space like predatory birds, their sleek hulls gleaming under the distant light of the system's star. Each vessel stretched over a kilometer in length, bristling with weapon arrays that pulsed with an eerie blue energy. "Ma'am, they're hailing us again," reported Lieutenant Jackson from the communication station. His voice carried the tension that filled the command center like thick smoke. Sarah nodded, her weathered face calm despite the circumstances. At 52, she had seen enough conflicts in the outer colonies to know when to panic and when to think. This was definitely a time to think. "Put them through, Lieutenant." The main screen flickered, revealing a creature that looked like a cross between a shark and a mantis. Its multiple eyes gleamed with what Sarah could only describe as smug satisfaction. When it spoke, the universal translator rendered its voice in cold, mechanical tones. "I am Admiral Kethvar of the Zephyrian Hegemony," the alien announced. "Your primitive species has expanded into territory claimed by our empire. You will surrender immediately or we will demonstrate the futility of resistance." Sarah studied the alien's face, noting the way its mandibles clicked with confidence. Behind Kethvar, she could see other Zephyrians moving with the casual efficiency of a species that had never known defeat. Their technology was clearly advanced. Energy weapons that could probably turn the mining station into vapor. Gravity manipulators that made their ships dance through space like leaves on the wind. "Admiral Kethvar," Sarah replied, keeping her voice steady. "I'm Commander Chen, administrator of this mining operation. Your ships are certainly impressive." The alien's equivalent of a smile spread across its face. "Indeed they are human. Each of my vessels carries enough firepower to sterilize the surface of your homeworld. Your crude projectile weapons and chemical rockets are no match for our technology." Sarah glanced at her tactical officer, who was frantically trying to get targeting solutions on the alien ships. The man looked up and gave an almost imperceptible shake of his head. Their defense platforms, a handful of missile batteries and 2 aging patrol ships, would last about 30 seconds against this fleet. "I can see that, Admiral," Sarah said. "However, I'm not authorized to make decisions regarding surrender on behalf of humanity. I'll need to consult with Earth." Kethvar's laugh sounded like metal grinding against stone. "Consult with your homeworld? Very well, human. I am not unreasonable. You have 48 of your hours to receive your surrender orders. Perhaps your leaders will be more sensible than your colonists." The transmission ended, leaving the command center in tense silence. Sarah turned to her communications officer. "Jackson, open a priority channel to Earth. Use Protocol 7. Lieutenant Jackson's fingers flew over his console, then stopped. He looked up at Sarah with confusion. "Ma'am, Protocol 7? That's a military code. For emergencies only." "Yes, it is," Sarah said quietly. "Send this message, Mining Station Alpha 7 to Earth Command. First contact situation. Hostile alien fleet. 17 vessels, technological superiority confirmed. Requesting immediate consultation on surrender terms." Then add this. "Personal message to Admiral Morrison from Commander Chen. They think we should be impressed by their battleships." As Jackson sent the message, Sarah walked to the observation window. The alien ships hung in space like sleeping giants, their hulls reflecting starlight in patterns that seemed almost hypnotic. She could see smaller craft moving between them, probably patrol ships or fighters. Everything about the Zephyrian fleet spoke of confidence, of a species that had conquered the galaxy through superior technology. And firepower. What the aliens didn't know was that humans had learned something important during their brief but violent expansion into space. They had learned that the most dangerous predators were often the ones that looked harmless. "Ma'am," called Jackson, "we're receiving acknowledgement from Earth. They're implementing Protocol 7 across all systems." Sarah nodded. "Good. Now send word to all civilian vessels in the system. Tell them to evacuate to minimum safe distance." "Minimum safe distance?" Jackson asked. "From what?" "From what's coming," Sarah said softly. Through the observation window, she could see the Zephyrian ship settling into a patrol pattern around the mining station. Admiral Kethvar was probably already planning his victory speech, preparing to add humanity to his empire's list of conquered species. The alien commander had made one critical error in his calculations. He had assumed that what he could see was all there was to see. Sarah's personal communicator chimed with an encrypted message from Earth. She read it quickly, then deleted it. The message had been simple. Dreadnoughts awakening. Maintain position until relieved. Remember, they started this. She looked back at the alien fleet, magnificent in their technological superiority. In a few hours, Admiral Kethvar would learn something that every human child knew from the stories of their homeworld. The most dangerous creatures were often the ones that didn't look dangerous at all. The mining station continued its routine operations as if nothing had changed. Workers moved through the corridors, machines hummed with activity, and the daily business of extracting resources from dead asteroids continued without interruption. To the aliens monitoring them, the humans appeared remarkably calm for a species facing extinction. What the Zephyrians couldn't detect were the subtle changes happening throughout the solar system. Ancient sensors were coming online. Power sources that had slept for decades were beginning to warm up. And in the deep black between the planets, things that had been waiting patiently for this moment were finally beginning to wake up. Admiral Kethvar had 48 hours to enjoy his superiority. After that, he would learn why humans had survived their own violent history long enough to reach the stars. Admiral Kethvar stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Stellar Dominance, watching the primitive human mining station through the massive viewport. 24 hours had passed since his ultimatum, and the humans showed no signs of panic or preparation for surrender. If anything, they seemed to be conducting business as usual. Admiral, called his intelligence officer Sub-Commander Ithak. We've intercepted another burst of human communications. Their encryption is laughably simple. Kethvar's mandibles clicked with amusement. What are they saying now? Pleading for mercy from their homeworld? Ithak's expression grew puzzled as he read from his display. Not exactly, sir. The messages are strange. They keep talking about evacuation, but not of people. They're moving equipment, supplies, and civilian vessels to what they call minimum safe distance. Safe distance from what? Kethvar asked, though his tone suggested he wasn't particularly concerned. From us? Do they think we intend to destroy their little mining operation immediately? That's what I thought at first, sir, but the distances they're using are excessive. They're moving everything at least 50,000 kilometers away from the station. That's far beyond the range of any weapon we might use on a mining facility. Kethvar considered this information. 50,000 kilometers was indeed strange. His fleet could glass the mining station with precision strikes that would barely register at a tenth of that distance. What could the humans be expecting that would require such extreme caution? Continue monitoring their communications, he ordered. Perhaps their primitive minds simply don't understand the precision of our weapons. Hours passed with little change. The human civilian vessels continued their exodus, moving with what seemed like practiced efficiency. Kethvar noticed that they weren't fleeing in panic. Their movements were coordinated, methodical, almost military in their precision. Admiral, Ithak called out again, his voice carrying a note of confusion that was beginning to irritate Kethvar. I'm detecting some unusual activity in the human's home system. What kind of activity? Energy signatures, sir. Massive ones. Our long-range sensors are picking up power sources coming online throughout their solar system. The signatures are, well, they're larger than anything we've seen from human technology so far. Kethvar moved to the sensor station and studied the readouts himself. What he saw made his confidence waver for the first time since arriving in human space. The energy signatures were indeed massive, some of them rivaling the power output of his own battleships. How many sources are we detecting? He asked. 47 so far, sir, and more are appearing every hour. They seem to be distributed throughout their entire solar system, some near their homeworld, others in the outer regions, and several in what appears to be empty space. Empty space? Kethavar's voice carried a sharp edge. Scan those coordinates again. Use our deepest penetration sensors. The results of the deep scan made the bridge fall silent. What they had thought was empty space was anything but empty. Massive objects, some as large as small moons, were registering on their sensors. Objects that had somehow avoided detection until now. How is this possible? Kethvar demanded. Our sensors should have detected anything that large when we first entered this system. His science officer, Commander Zelton, looked up from her console with an expression of growing alarm. Sir, I believe they were using some form of stealth technology. These objects appear to have been powered down, running silent. They were effectively invisible to our scans. Stealth technology? Kethvar scoffed. These primitives barely have faster-than-light travel. Perhaps we underestimated them, sir, Zelton said quietly. The energy signatures suggest these objects are substantial. As if summoned by their conversation, another burst of human communications reached their sensors. This time the message was different, shorter, more direct, and sent on what appeared to be a military frequency. All units, return to Sol. Execute Dreadnought Protocol 7. Ethak looked up from his station. Admiral, that message was broadcast on multiple frequencies simultaneously. It wasn't directed at the mining station. It was a system-wide transmission to their entire solar system. Dreadnought Protocol 7, Kethvar repeated slowly. The word dreadnought translated roughly as fear nothing in the human language, but it also had military connotations that made his skin crawl. Sir, Zelthan reported, her voice now openly concerned, I'm detecting movement among those large objects in human space. Whatever they are, they're beginning to change course. Multiple signatures are now heading toward the system. Kethvar studied the tactical display showing the human solar system. Red dots representing unknown contacts were beginning to move in coordinated patterns. Their courses all pointing toward one destination, the system where his fleet currently held a human mining station hostage. Time to intercept? He asked. Based on their current acceleration patterns, approximately 18 hours, sir. Kethvar's confidence began to crack. In his experience, primitive species responded to superior technology in predictable ways. Panic, desperate negotiations, or hopeless last stands with their existing forces. They didn't calmly evacuate civilians to safe distances and then summon mysterious objects from across their star system. Admiral, his communications officer announced, we're receiving a transmission from the human homeworld. It's on official diplomatic frequencies. Put it through, Kethvar ordered, hoping that Earth was finally ready to discuss surrender terms. The face that appeared on his screen was that of an elderly human male in what appeared to be a military uniform. The man's expression was calm, almost friendly, but his eyes held something that made Kethvar uncomfortable. Admiral Kethvar, the human said, I'm Admiral Morrison of Earth Defense Command. I understand you've made contact with one of our mining stations. Indeed I have, Kethvar replied, trying to regain his commanding tone. Your commander has requested consultation regarding surrender terms. I trust you're ready to discuss the terms of your species' integration into the hegemony. Admiral Morrison's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes seemed to sharpen. I appreciate your patience in allowing us time to respond, Admiral. However, there seems to be some misunderstanding about the nature of this consultation. Misunderstanding? You see, Commander Chen didn't contact us about surrender terms, Morrison said calmly. She contacted us because your arrival triggered certain protocols, old procedures that we hoped we'd never have to use again. Kethvar felt a chill run down his spine. What protocols? Dreadnought Protocol 7, Admiral. It's quite simple, really. When an unknown force threatens human civilians with superior technology, we wake up the old ships, the dangerous ships, the ships we built back when we were still figuring out how to kill each other efficiently. The transmission ended, leaving Kethvar staring at a blank screen. Around him, his bridge crew worked frantically at their stations, trying to gather more information about the approaching objects. But deep in his gut, Kethvar was beginning to suspect that he had made a terrible mistake. He had come here expecting to intimidate primitives with his advanced battleships. Instead, he was about to meet whatever monsters humanity had built in the dark spaces between the stars, and those monsters were coming home. The first sign that something was wrong came from the Zephyrian fleet's perimeter scouts. Lieutenant Commander. Vexhai was monitoring the outer reaches of the mining system when his sensors detected an anomaly, a massive energy signature that hadn't been there moments before. Scout 7 to flagship, he transmitted. I'm reading a large contact bearing 27 Mark IV. Distance approximately 1 million kilometers in closing. Admiral Kethvar's voice crackled through the communication system. Define large, Commander. Vexhai checked his readings twice before responding. Sir, the contact is showing a mass of approximately 50 million tons. Initial readings suggest it's metallic. The silence that followed stretched uncomfortably long. 50 million tons was larger than any ship in the Zephyrian fleet. It was larger than most space stations. Admiral, came another voice. Scout 4. I'm detecting multiple large contacts entering the system. Current count is 7. No, 12. Contacts are still appearing. On the bridge of the Stellar Dominance, Admiral Kethvar watched as his tactical display filled with red icons representing unknown vessels. Each contact was massive, dwarfing his own battleships, and they were arriving from multiple vectors throughout the system. Science Officer Zelthun, he commanded. Full spectrum analysis on these contacts. I want to know what we're dealing with. Commander Zelthun's mandibles clicked nervously as she worked her console. Admiral, the energy signatures are unusual. These vessels appear to be running on fusion reactors, but the power output is enormous. Much larger than anything we've seen from human technology. Fusion reactors? Kethvar scoffed. Primitive technology. Our antimatter systems are far superior. Yes, sir, but the scale is what concerns me. These reactors appear to be the size of small buildings. And, sir, I'm detecting weapons signatures. Before Kethvar could respond, his communications officer announced an incoming transmission. Admiral, we're being hailed by the lead contact. Put it through. The face that appeared on the screen was human, but unlike the calm diplomat from Earth, this man looked like he had been carved from stone. His uniform was different, older, more utilitarian, and his eyes held the cold calculation of someone who had seen too much combat. Admiral Kethvar, the human said. I'm Commodore Harrison, commanding officer of the UHSV Uncompromising. I understand you wanted to see our military. Kethvar studied the human's face, noting the scars and the way the man's eyes never quite met his directly, the mark of someone constantly assessing threats. Your military? Where are your sleek warships, human? I see only industrial vessels on my sensors. Commodore Harrison's expression didn't change. Admiral, you're looking at them. As if responding to some unseen signal, the massive contacts began to shed their disguises. What had appeared to be asteroid mining ships and bulk cargo haulers began to unfold like mechanical flowers, revealing their true nature. Armor plating slid away to expose weapon systems. Cargo bays opened to reveal launch tubes. Mining equipment retracted to make way for sensor arrays and targeting systems. The largest of these transformations was taking place directly ahead of the Zephyrian fleet. What had appeared to be a small asteroid began to expand, unfolding sections that had been hidden within its rocky exterior. In minutes, it had revealed itself as a warship that dwarfed anything in Kethvar's fleet. What you're seeing, Admiral, Harrison continued, are humanity's dreadnoughts. We built them during our expansion into space, back when we were still fighting each other. Each one is designed for a single purpose, to end wars. Kethvar stared at the massive vessel now dominating his tactical display. The UHSV Uncompromising was 1 kilometer wide and 3 kilometers long, its hull bristling with weapon systems he couldn't identify. Unlike the elegant curves of Zephyrian warships, this vessel looked like it had been built by engineers who cared nothing for aesthetics and everything for function. Impossible, he whispered. Ships that large would be too slow, too cumbersome for combat. You're right, Harrison agreed. They're not meant for dogfighting or elegant space combat. They're siege weapons, Admiral, built to crack fortified worlds and break enemy fleets through sheer overwhelming firepower. More dreadnoughts were appearing throughout the system, each one unique in design but sharing the same brutal functionality. Some looked like flying cities bristling with gun turrets. Others resembled mechanical sea creatures from humanity's ancient oceans, all teeth and armor. A few appeared to be nothing more than massive engines strapped to weapon platforms. How many? Kethvar asked, though he wasn't sure he wanted to know the answer. How many what, Admiral? How many dreadnoughts? How many weapons per ship? How many ways we can end this conversation? Kethvar's tactical officer provided the answer he dreaded. Sir, I'm counting 37. No, 41 separate dreadnought-class vessels. Total combined tonnage exceeds 2 billion tons. The numbers were staggering. Kethvar's entire fleet, with all 17 battleships, massed less than 50 million tons. These human dreadnoughts outweighed his force by a ratio of 40-1. Admiral, his science officer reported, I'm detecting some unusual readings from their weapon systems. The energy signatures don't match any known technology. Of course they don't, Harrison said, apparently monitoring their communications. We didn't build these ships to fight aliens, Admiral. We built them to fight other humans. We built them to fight enemies who knew all our tricks and tactics, who had similar technology and similar intelligence. We had to be creative. One of the dreadnoughts, a vessel that looked like a flying mountain with engines, began to demonstrate this creativity. Its surface opened like a flower, revealing a weapon system that defied easy classification. It appeared to be some kind of mass driver, but on a scale that made Kethvar's breath catch. "That's the UHSV Inevitable," Harrison explained. "Her main gun can accelerate a tungsten rod to 12% of light speed. At that velocity, the projectile carries more kinetic energy than most nuclear weapons." Kethvar felt his confidence crumbling. Energy shields, the foundation of Zephyrian military superiority, were designed to deflect energy weapons and slow-moving projectiles. They were useless against solid objects moving at relativistic speeds. "But perhaps you'd prefer a demonstration of our more conventional weapons," Harrison continued. Another dreadnought, this one resembling a massive flying cathedral, began to charge its weapon systems. Energy readings spiked to levels that made the Zephyrian sensors scream warnings. "The UHSV Retribution carries plasma cannons that can melt through a kilometer of battle steel in under 30 seconds, Harrison said conversationally. "We originally designed them for breaking through the underground bunkers that human generals used to hide in during our world wars." As more dreadnoughts arrived and took positions around the system, Kethvar began to understand the true scope of humanity's deception. These weren't primitive beings who had stumbled into space with crude rockets. They were apex predators who had spent millennia perfecting the art of warfare, then disguised their deadliest weapons as harmless industrial equipment. "Admiral," his communications officer whispered, "should I prepare surrender terms?" Before Kethvar could answer, Commodore Harrison spoke again. "Admiral, you came here expecting us to be impressed by your battleships. Your technology is indeed advanced, elegant, and efficient, but you made one critical error in your calculations." "What error?" Kethvar asked, though he suspected he already knew. "You assumed that the most dangerous predators would look dangerous," Harrison said. "In our experience, Admiral, the creatures you have to worry about are the ones that look harmless right up until they decide to kill you." The tactical display now showed over 50 dreadnoughts in various stages of deployment throughout the system. Each one was a testament to humanity's capacity for violence, engineered by a species that had turned warfare into a science and then hidden the results among the stars. "Admiral," Kethvar realized that his fleet of 17 elegant battleships was facing an enemy that had prepared for war on a scale he couldn't have imagined. And the most terrifying part was that these monsters had been here all along, sleeping among the asteroids and cargo lanes, waiting for someone to wake them up. Someone like him. Admiral Kethvar stood frozen on his bridge, watching the impossible sight of 57 human dreadnoughts arranging themselves in a loose formation around his fleet. Each massive vessel dwarfed his elegant battleships, and their weapon systems showed energy readings that made his science officer's mandibles click with nervous fear. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported, "the humans are maintaining position at approximately 100,000 kilometers. They appear to be waiting." Kethvar's pride warred with his growing fear. The Zephyrian hegemony had conquered 17 star systems through superior technology and overwhelming firepower. His fleet represented the pinnacle of military engineering, equipped with antimatter weapons, quantum shields, and gravity manipulators that could tear apart lesser vessels with ease. "Open a channel to the human commander," he ordered. "Let's end this charade." Commodore Harrison's scarred face appeared on the main screen, his expression unreadable. Behind him, the bridge of the UHSV Uncompromising hummed with quiet activity. Humans moving with the practiced efficiency of a crew that had seen real combat. "Commodore," Kethvar began, forcing confidence into his voice, "your display is impressive, but you underestimate Zephyrian technology. Your primitive kinetic weapons and chemical explosives are no match for our quantum shields and antimatter torpedoes. I suggest you withdraw before we are forced to demonstrate our superiority." Harrison listened quietly, then turned to someone off-screen. "Navigation, move us to demonstration position. Weapons, prepare the Helios system for a standard test firing." "What are you doing?" Kethvar demanded. "You want a demonstration of superior technology, Admiral? Very well." Harrison's expression remained calm. "Navigation, please identify a suitable target for our test." On the tactical display, Kethvar watched as the UHSV Uncompromising began moving toward the edge of the system. His sensors tracked its progress as it took position near a small moon, a dead chunk of rock about 50 kilometers in diameter. "Admiral," his science officer whispered, "their main gun is powering up. Energy readings they're off our scale." Through the massive viewport of his flagship, Kethvar could see the human dreadnought in the distance, its hull bristling with weapons that defied easy classification. The largest of these, a weapon system that ran nearly the full length of the ship, began to glow with an ominous light. "The Helios system," Harrison explained conversationally, "is our standard kinetic bombardment weapon. We originally designed it to crack hardened military bunkers during the resource wars of 2387. It accelerates tungsten rods using a combination of electromagnetic, rails and gravity manipulation." Kethvar felt his blood chill. "Gravity manipulation? That's our technology." "Not anymore," Harrison replied. "We've had 300 years to study physics, Admiral. We learned a few tricks during our expansion into space." The weapon fired without ceremony. No dramatic energy beams or colorful explosions. One moment the moon was there, whole and intact. The next moment it simply wasn't. The tungsten projectile, accelerated to 12% of light speed, struck the moon with the force of several nuclear weapons. The impact didn't just destroy the target, it vaporized it so completely that nothing remained but an expanding cloud of plasma and debris. Kethvar's bridge fell silent. His quantum shields that could deflect antimatter blasts and redirect energy weapons, would be utterly useless against a solid projectile moving at relativistic speeds. At that velocity, the tungsten rod carried more kinetic energy than anything in his fleet's arsenal. "Impressive," he managed to say, though his voice sounded hollow even to himself. "But one weapon does not—" "Oh, that's not our only trick," Harrison interrupted. "Would you like to see our plasma cannons? Or perhaps our gravitic mines? We have quite a collection." Another dreadnought, the UHSV Inevitable, demonstrated its primary weapon system by targeting a large asteroid. Instead of vaporizing it, the plasma cannon melted it into slag in less than 30 seconds. A controlled demonstration that showed precise targeting rather than raw destructive power. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported quietly, "I'm analyzing their weapon systems. The energy output suggests they could crack a planet." Kethvar studied the tactical readouts with growing horror. Each human dreadnought carried enough firepower to level continents. Together they represented a force capable of sterilizing entire star systems. "How?" he asked Harrison. "How did your primitive species develop such weapons?" Harrison's expression grew cold. "Primitive? Admiral, we spent 10,000 years perfecting the art of killing each other. We built these ships during our expansion wars when human fought human across a dozen star systems. Every weapon you see was designed to kill enemies who were just as smart, just as resourceful, and just as desperate as we were." The implications hit Kethvar like a physical blow. The Zephyrian hegemony had conquered less advanced species, races that had basic space travel but nothing approaching their technological sophistication. They had never faced an enemy that had evolved alongside similar technology. "We learned that superior technology means nothing if your enemy has superior strategy," Harrison continued. "We learned that the most dangerous weapons are the ones your enemy doesn't see coming. And we learned that the best way to win a war is to be so overwhelmingly prepared for it that no one wants to fight you in the first place." As if to emphasize his point, more dreadnoughts began arriving in the system. Kethvar's sensors detected massive energy signatures appearing throughout human space. Apparently, this was only a fraction of their total force. "How many ships do you have?" he whispered. "Enough," Harrison replied simply. "Admiral, let me explain something about human military doctrine. We don't believe in fair fights. When we go to war, we bring everything we have and end it as quickly as possible. These dreadnoughts were built on the principle that overwhelming force prevents conflicts from escalating." Kethvar looked at his own fleet. 17 sleek, elegant battleships that had seemed so powerful just hours ago. Now they looked like toys compared to the human war machines surrounding them. "Your quantum shields," Harrison continued, "are quite impressive. They can deflect energy weapons and slow down incoming missiles. But they're useless against kinetic projectiles at relativistic speeds. Your antimatter weapons are devastating, but they require time to lock onto targets. Our weapons fire at light speed. The Commodore gestured to something off-screen and new icons appeared on Kethavar's tactical display. Thousands of smaller contacts were launching from the dreadnoughts, fighter craft, drones, and weapons platforms that quickly took positions throughout the system. And then there are our support systems, Harrison said. Automated defense networks, hunter-killer drones, gravitic mines that can appear anywhere in the system within minutes. We learned long ago that space combat isn't about individual ship duels. It's about controlling entire regions of space. Kethavar realized that his fleet wasn't just outgunned, it was trapped. The humans had turned the entire star system into a weapon, with overlapping fields of fire and defensive systems that could respond to threats faster than his ships could move. "What do you want?" he asked finally. Harrison's expression softened slightly. "Admiral, we want to go back to mining asteroids and trading with our neighbors. We want to forget that these ships exist and go back to pretending that the universe is a peaceful place. But you made that impossible when you threatened our civilians." The weight of his mistake settled on Kethavar's shoulders like a crushing burden. He had come here expecting to intimidate primitives with superior technology. Instead, he had awakened sleeping giants, predators that had spent centuries preparing for exactly this kind of encounter. "Your move, Admiral," Harrison said quietly. "But I'd suggest you choose carefully. We'd prefer to settle this diplomatically, but we're prepared for other options." Around them, the dreadnoughts waited in patient silence, their weapons powered down but ready. 57 ships that represented humanity's capacity for absolute warfare, disguised as harmless industrial vessels until someone had been foolish enough to threaten their creators. Kethavar realized that he was facing a choice between surrender and annihilation. And for the first time in his long military career, the choice was painfully obvious. Admiral Kethavar sat in his command chair, staring at the tactical display that showed 57 human dreadnoughts surrounding his fleet. The elegant Zephyrian battleships that had seemed so mighty just days ago now looked like children's toys, floating among sleeping giants. His communications officer looked up from her console. "Admiral, shall I transmit our surrender?" The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Surrender. The Zephyrian hegemony had never surrendered to anyone. They were the conquerors, the superior species that brought order to primitive worlds through advanced technology and overwhelming force. "Sir?" the officer prompted. Before Kethavar could respond, an incoming transmission chimed on his console. Commodore Harrison's scarred face appeared on the screen, but his expression had changed. The cold calculation was still there, but it was tempered with something that looked almost like sympathy. "Admiral Kethavar," Harrison said, "I'd like to speak with you privately if possible. Ship-to-ship communication, just the two of us." Kethavar glanced around his bridge at his crew. All of them were looking to him for answers he didn't have. "Very well, Commodore. Private channel." The bridge fell silent as the connection switched to his personal communication system. Harrison's image appeared on his private screen, and when the human spoke, his voice was quieter, more personal. "Admiral, I know what you're thinking right now. You're wondering how you're going to explain this to your superiors. You're wondering if there's some way to salvage your mission, some tactical advantage you haven't considered." Kethavar said nothing, but Harrison's assessment was accurate. "Let me save you some time," Harrison continued. "There isn't. You came here with 17 ships expecting to intimidate a primitive species. Instead, you found apex predators who have spent millennia perfecting the art of war. The mathematics are simple. You can't win this fight." "Then why haven't you destroyed us?" Kethavar asked quietly. Harrison was silent for a long moment, and when he spoke, his voice carried the weight of experience. "Because, Admiral, we learned something important during our expansion into space. We learned that the strongest civilizations aren't the ones that can destroy their enemies. They're the ones that choose not to." The words hit Kethavar like a physical blow. "Choose not to? Do you know why we disguised our dreadnoughts as mining ships and cargo haulers?" Harrison asked. "It wasn't just for tactical advantage. It was because we hoped we'd never have to use them again. We built these ships during a dark period in our history, when human fought human across the stars. We swore that once we unified our species, we'd only use them in defense." Kethavar studied the human commander's face, looking for deception or weakness. Instead, he saw something that chilled him more than the massive weapons pointed at his fleet. He saw genuine regret. "You see, Admiral, we understand something about warfare that perhaps your species hasn't learned yet. The most dangerous weapons aren't the ones that destroy your enemies. They're the ones that turn you into something you don't want to be. On his tactical display, Kethavar could see the dreadnoughts beginning to power down their weapons. Not all of them. Enough remained active to vaporize his fleet in seconds, but enough to show that the humans were willing to step back from the brink. "I don't understand," Kethavar said. Harrison leaned back in his chair, and for the first time he looked tired. "Admiral, these ships represent humanity's capacity for absolute violence. Each one is a monument to our ability to destroy entire civilizations. We could glass your homeworld, crack your planets, and hunt down every Zephyrian in the galaxy." The casual way Harrison described such devastation made Kethavar's blood run cold. "But if we did that," Harrison continued, "what would we become? We'd be the monsters that other species tell stories about. We'd be the thing that parents use to frighten their children. Is that really the legacy we want to leave among the stars?" Kethavar began to understand. The humans weren't just demonstrating their military superiority. They were demonstrating their restraint. They were showing him that they had the power to destroy his entire civilization, but were choosing not to use it. "So what happens now?" Kethavar asked. "Now, Admiral, you have a choice. You can return to your superiors and tell them that humanity is a threat to be eliminated. You can recommend a massive military buildup, more ships, bigger weapons. You can turn this into the kind of war that ends with entire species extinct." Harrison paused, letting the implications sink in. "Or," he continued, "you can tell them the truth. Tell them that you found a species that has weapons capable of cracking worlds but chooses to use them only in defense. Tell them that humanity offers trade, diplomacy, and mutual benefit to those who approach us in peace." Kethavar looked around his bridge at his crew. They were all listening, though they pretended to be focused on their instruments. The choice Harrison offered wasn't just his to make. It would affect every Zephyrian in the galaxy. "And if we choose war?" Kethavar asked. Harrison's expression grew cold again. "Then we'll give you one. Admiral, we've spent 300 years preparing for the possibility that we might encounter a hostile species with superior technology. Every simulation, every war game, every strategic analysis has led to the same conclusion. If we're forced to fight for our survival, we'll make sure we're the ones who survive." The weight of that statement settled over the bridge like a shroud. The humans weren't threatening him. They were simply stating a fact. They had built these weapons not for conquest, but for survival, and if pushed to the brink they would use them. "But we'd prefer not to," Harrison added, his voice softening again. "We'd prefer to welcome the Zephyrian hegemony as neighbors, trading partners, perhaps even friends." "The choice is yours, Admiral." Kethavar made his decision. "Commodore, I request immediate diplomatic contact with your government. The Zephyrian hegemony wishes to establish formal relations with humanity." Harrison smiled, the first genuine expression of pleasure Kethavar had seen from him. "I think that can be arranged, Admiral. But first, let me show you something." The tactical display changed, showing not just the local system but the entire region of space around human territory. Dozens of star systems were marked with human colonies, trade routes, and defensive installations. It was a thriving civilization that had been hiding in plain sight. "This is what we built after we stopped fighting each other," Harrison explained. "Research stations, colonies, trade networks, art, music, literature, all the things that make a civilization worth preserving. We built the dreadnoughts to protect this, Admiral, not to conquer new worlds, but to make sure that what we've built can continue to grow." As Kethavar studied the display, he realized that he was looking at something the Zephyrian hegemony had never achieved, a civilization that had evolved beyond conquest, that had learned to create rather than simply take. "Admiral," Harrison said, "I'm going to share our coordinates with you. Not our military installations, our trade stations, our cultural centers, our universities. Places where your people can come to learn about us and we can learn about you." The gesture was unprecedented. No conquered species had ever been given such access to Zephyrian territory. But then again, the humans hadn't been conquered. "There's one condition," Harrison added. "Your fleet will be escorted out of this system by a small task force of our ships. Not as prisoners, but as guests. We want to make sure you make it home safely." Kethavar understood. The humans were showing him that they could track and follow his fleet anywhere, while simultaneously demonstrating their peaceful intentions. "And after that, Admiral, We'll see if two species that have learned to make war can learn to make peace instead. As the Zephyrian fleet prepared to depart, escorted by a handful of human vessels that still dwarfed them, Kethavar reflected on everything he had learned. He had come to this system expecting to add another primitive species to the hegemony's empire. Instead, he had found something far more valuable, an example of what his own people might become if they chose evolution over conquest. The dreadnoughts were already disappearing, folding back into their disguises as harmless industrial ships. In a matter of hours, the system would look peaceful again, giving no sign of the massive military force that had been revealed. But Kethavar would never forget what he had seen. 57 warships that could crack worlds, wielded by a species that chose restraint over revenge. It was a lesson that would change not just his own understanding, but the future of both their civilizations. The most dangerous predators, he now understood, were indeed the ones that chose not to hunt. And perhaps if both species were wise enough, they could choose to hunt together, not for conquest but for knowledge, growth, and a future among the stars that neither could achieve alone.